Welcome everybody to this MindEar webinar, Understanding the Tinnitus Journey to Relief, with our esteemed guest, Professor Laure Jacquemin, who is a tinnitus specialist as well as a tinnitus coach. Professor Jacquemin yields from the University Hospital of Antwerp, which is located in Belgium, for those of you who are not familiar. And through Dr. Jacquemin's career, she has guided thousands of patients from the onset of their tinnitus to finding relief through personalized treatment plans. So we're very excited to have Professor Jacquemin here today to talk about understanding the tinnitus journey to relief. Just a reminder, at the end of the session, we will have a live question and answer session. So we invite you to stick around as long as you can. You can ask us any questions in the Q&A function on the bottom bar of the webinar panel. We won't take questions directly in the webinar, so we're going to hold those to the end at the Q&A session. So feel free to put anything in there that you'd like to talk about later. And we're also going to offer you a MindEar discount for the premium subscription of the MindEar app, which we will provide at the end of the webinar. So stick around to collect that referral code that we'll provide you. Once again, we thank everybody for joining us. And with that said, I'm going to hand it off to Professor Laure Jacquemin. Take it over, Laure.
Thank you so much, Michael. Okay, good morning, afternoon, evening to you all, depending where you're logging in into the world. Thank you for joining us today. And I will present today your tinnitus journey to tinnitus relief. And my goal is really to help you understand how your tinnitus journey can be, and that's very unique to every one of you. And I will do my very best to make clear how you can get insight on forming that journey. And I will also help you identify the tools that you need on that journey. And to make that happen, we have some agenda points, which is making clear how your tinnitus profile looks like, how that turns into your tinnitus, so how your tinnitus is working in your body and in your brain. And then I will translate that to a tinnitus journey. And with some MindEar tools, we hope that you can find there that tinnitus relief that you're looking for. So let's get started. We have a busy agenda. So let me get you some insight in the tinnitus profile. What is that tinnitus profile? What I mean with that is that it's a profile that determines your path on your tinnitus journey. So it's unique to you, and important for that is to identify the triggers or causes of your tinnitus. And I know that's not always easy. Definitely finding the exact cause of your tinnitus is often a challenge, but sometimes it gets a bit easier if we talk in terms of triggers or risk factors that have led to your tinnitus. So let me dive into it to make this more clear what the tinnitus profile can look like. So here on the slide, you see different elements that can be part of that profile. You can identify yourself with all of them, or there might be some of them that stick out. So I will talk about hearing loss and how hearing loss can play a role in the tinnitus journey. And that's something that most people know, but I know it can also be very frustrating when you don't have any hearing loss and you still have tinnitus. And that's why it's so important that there are other elements and risk factors that can lead to tinnitus. It can be coming from your body, from your neck and your jaw. It can be happening in a moment that you feel more fearful or feel a bit more down or stressed. So I will explain all of this in a moment. But it's important that there are different elements that can lead to tinnitus. And I always explain it to my patients as it's often a puzzle, and it are puzzle pieces that come together that make that you have tinnitus and maybe your coworker that has the same noise exposure doesn't have tinnitus. So I will give you some insight into that. But first, I want to just already have a feeling of who's here in the room. So I'm gonna just start a poll because I want to know if there are any risk factors that you think of that play a role in your tinnitus. So in the poll that you should be seeing on your screen now, you can answer if hearing damage is a big element in your tinnitus journey, or maybe you identify that stress was very important, or maybe you just don't know, and that's also very okay. At the start of your tinnitus journey, it might sound all very unclear, and maybe even after a few years with tinnitus, you still don't understand fully what is going on. And that's why we are here, to hopefully make that more clear for you. So, okay, I see a lot of different risk factors here being answered. Most of them is hearing damage. So hearing damage is, and I will come back to that in a second, the most known and the most common risk factor for tinnitus, but it's definitely not the only one. And that's what you also see happening here. There are different elements that play a role, and maybe even an element that I didn't include here in the poll. So, okay, thank you for answering that. That gives me already a good feeling of who is here with me in the webinar today. And so let's explain some
Laura,
of
can I
these.
real quick? A few people have asked,
Yes,
can you move the microphone a little closer to your mouth, please?
definitely. Is this better?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks for notifying that. Okay, so let's indeed dive into immediately the hearing loss one, as that was the most answered. Yes, otological problems are one of the most important risk factors. There can go a lot of things wrong on the auditory pathway. It's quite complex the way we hear. There are vibrations in the air that then are brought to our ear canal, then to our eardrum, and then there's different bones that work together to make amplify the sound. Then they go into our cochlea, where these vibrations become electrical stimuli. Then they go on the auditory nerve to our brain, and then we might hear the sound. But that means it's a complex pathway, and there can go a lot of things wrong on this pathway, sadly. And if you have a problem on this auditory pathway, it can lead to tinnitus. It can start from a simple earwax problem in your ear canal to maybe some fluid behind your eardrum in the middle ear, or a problem in the cochlea where, for example, due to age, your hair cells got damaged. So there's different causes for hearing loss. But the most important thing to know is, okay, if you hear less, for which reason it might be, this can lead to tinnitus. And I hope the next video will explain that for you a bit better. So you see here those vibrations that I was talking about coming into the ear and leading to a stimulation of the brain. So in a normal circumstance, these sounds come into our brain, but our brain easily detects when it's missing input, and then this is happening, what you see here now. The brain starts being overactive, hyperactive, creating its own phantom sound, which is your tinnitus. So it's not generated in the ears. We call it ringing in the ears, but actually it should be ringing in the brain, because it's the brain that is being hyperactive as a response to a lack of auditory input. So yes, hearing damage can lead to tinnitus, but it's not as simple as that. It's not only that hyperactivity in the auditory area in the brain that leads to tinnitus. There is often also a role of our emotional system. And definitely when we are already feeling down, feeling anxious, feeling fearful, that makes us more vulnerable for a symptom like tinnitus. And let's go further into the video. Oh, let me mute the sound. I'd rather explain it myself to you. So where you saw the beginning, that hyperactivity in that auditory area in the brain, it becomes more complex. You see here different areas becoming overactive. So it's not just one spot in the brain that is overactive. No, also our emotional system and our attention system play a role into tinnitus. So we call it, as researchers, often the tinnitus network. You don't have one point in your brain that's overactive. No, it's a network of activities that is going on. And that's why sometimes patients ask me, can you not just cut that piece out of my brain where the tinnitus is and I'm free? Well, it's more complex than that because it's different areas in the brain that play a role into tinnitus. So it is an auditory symptom, but also our emotions and our attention play a big role. And to explain that a bit better, I want to make a comparison with a phenomenon that is called the cocktail party effect. Imagine you're on a party and you're having a group conversation that is often already very difficult on its own. If there is a conversation behind your back, it's almost impossible to understand what they are saying. So you hear that they're talking, but you have no idea what they're talking about. Until the moment they say your name. And your name is just an important stimuli for your brain. It's what you already know from childhood on. And your brain detects, my name, and you hear it. This is the proof that the whole conversation in the back was coming into your brain, but your brain was deciding, this is not important, we ignore it. And from the moment that the brain detects your name, it says, aha, but this part is important. And it brings it into your attention. And that's also what's happening with tinnitus. It could, in an ideal scenario, stay on the back of your brain and not come into your attention. But your brain decides that your tinnitus is important and brings it into your attention. And that is because of that role of the emotion system and of the attention. So yes, it is because we, for example, sometimes monitor our tinnitus. We write down how loud it is today, how loud it is in the next hour. We are scared sometimes when we come home that the tinnitus will be louder because it was a busy day, for example. So our attention system is often focused on it. And also, nobody finds tinnitus a beautiful, enjoying sound. No, there are a lot of negative associations with the sound, and that again plays a role. So we are having a very complex symptom in a way because it is our auditory system, our emotional system, and our attention system that are working together to keep that tinnitus in our attention. And of course, there is a way to turn that back, and I will come to that in a minute. So let me summarize what I have already told you. So normally, in a normal situation, there is sound coming from your ear to your brain. At some point in time, there might be hearing damage due to noise exposure, due to age, due to whatever reason, and that our brain is picking up that there is less input coming from the ear and it starts generating its own sound. Now you might think, I don't have any hearing loss and still I have tinnitus. Well, let me explain you that there is also something like hidden hearing loss. So sometimes we see in the clinic a patient with tinnitus and we test their hearing and their hearing looks perfect. Well, the hearing test doesn't capture everything. There might be still something, there might be still a little damage at the hair cell level, or even further down the road on the auditory nerve that brings the sound to your brain. There might be something going on there that we cannot capture with a standard audiological testing. Also, I want to have a quick reminder that sometimes the ENT says, yes, your hearing is fine. It's normal to your age. Well, if you're 80 years old, for example, a normal age for your hearing is still often a hearing loss. So have a look into that, into your hearing, understand your hearing better, but also know that there are phenomena like hidden hearing loss that while we test the hearing, it seems normal, but there is still things that are not working as perfect as they used to be. And then, okay, that sound is generated in the brain. Like I said, it doesn't stop there. The tinnitus comes in our attention. It's a sound we didn't hear before. It's a sound that we don't want to be there. We know that that sound should not be there. So we have an emotional reaction to that sound. And that makes it even worse. Our brain then thinks, this sound is very important. Let me bring it more into your attention. And we get like stuck into this vicious cycle of the tinnitus and our attention and our emotional reaction to it. And then, like I said, when we feel stressed, when we feel anxious, when we feel down, our brain is even more sensitive to a phenomenon like tinnitus. When we feel stressed, when we feel anxious, when we feel depressed, our filter system in our brain doesn't work that well. Like I was explaining before, our brain detects what is important that we focus on, what is not important we ignore. When we feel stressed, anxious, or depressed, that filter system doesn't operate that well, and it brings more things in our attention, like the tinnitus. So that is also something that plays a role in how tinnitus is generated. So with that, I want to move on from the tinnitus profile and how your tinnitus is working to how to find relief, because that's why we are all here probably in the webinar, to find and understand our pathway better to relief. And we at MindEar talk about different stages in that process. And it's important to identify them to also know for you, okay, where am I and what are my steps that I still need to take to come wherever I want to be. And the first stage is awareness. At some point, we become aware of our tinnitus. We may experience it as a very annoying or distressing sound. The first thing we're going to do is Dr. Google it. We're going to Google, oh no, I hear a sound in my ears. And often what then appears on the internet is not calming you down. Often those things are even making the things worse at that moment, in that phase. And then a good step will be to, if you're in that first awareness stage, to talk to a professional. For example, if you think you have a hearing loss, to check your hearing. And a lot of you might have downloaded the MindEar app in this stage. And then the goal is to move to stage number 2. It's the allowance stage, where we begin to accept the tinnitus as part of our life. And that sounds maybe for people that are still in the beginning of the journey, a very difficult word, accept the tinnitus as part of your life. But there has to become some form of acceptance before we can start taking steps to break those feelings of anxiety down. We want to take that anxiety away from the tinnitus, and we want to start influencing the impact it has on our daily life. So in the allowance phase, where you start recognizing, okay, the tinnitus is here, I want to do something about it. You're going to start, for example, your journey in the MindEar app. You might want to talk to a tinnitus coach, to a tinnitus expert, which is also, for example, possible in the MindEar app. And then we start to adapt to the tinnitus. In an ideal scenario, the tinnitus becomes less noticeable. Like I said, your brain starts to not find your tinnitus the most important thing anymore that's going on. No, sometimes it starts to move to the background. You might find it less bothersome in this stage, and that might be achieved through including various techniques. That might be through sound therapy, through cognitive behavioral therapy, through relaxation, but I will come to those steps in a second. Anyway, in this stage, you will continue strategies that are working for you. And then lastly, where do we want to end up is that achievement stage, where you are managing your tinnitus and your tinnitus is no longer a problem. I'm not saying that you might not be any more aware of your tinnitus sound. When you search for it, when you think of it, you might become aware of your tinnitus, but it does not longer interferes with your daily life and doesn't impact anymore on your quality of life. And that is where we want to end up. And the big difference is that in the beginning, you feel that the tinnitus is driving the car and that the tinnitus is in control. And in that last stage, we want to be that you are in control and not your tinnitus anymore. So let me fill the room now. I already know the risk factors that play a role in your tinnitus, but I want to know, where do you guys feel that you are at this moment in the tinnitus journey? So I'm going to start a poll here. And if I talked about its different phases, from tinnitus awareness, where you're aware of it and you have no clue yet what the next step is because you just looked on the internet and that was not very satisfying maybe, to the next steps where you started your journey and started to include some elements that are hopefully helpful for you. I'm happy to see that there's different, everybody's in a different stage. So for the people of the awareness stage, it might be nice for you to see that there are also people already in that achievement stage. I know it sounds very far away if you think of you being in control, but we know it's possible. And you see here nicely that you can move through these different stages to where you want to be. So thank you for that. Thank you for all being so responsive and giving me insight in where you are. So let me also share this with you, because I think maybe, I'm not sure if you could see it until now, what was happening. So to be sure, here are the results from the tinnitus journey stages, where everybody is at this moment. Okay, great. So let's move on. We know where we are. That's already a next step, but how do we move further, of course? It's important, what I want to say here is that we understand that everybody experiences tinnitus very differently, and that is a very unique journey. And not everyone progresses at the same speed. Not everybody has the same needs. So it's very difficult. Patients often ask me, in how much time will I be where I want to be? And that depends on your needs. Where do you want to be? But also on so much different factors. So some people can find almost immediately relief, but many tinnitus patients require additional time and guidance. So that is perfectly normal. It's perfectly normal that you need that extra guidance to be in control. And we talk typically about 3 to 6 months for someone to start perceiving the benefits of tinnitus management strategies. But anyway, no matter where you are on your tinnitus journey, we are here to help you move further. And let me explain you some elements of the MindEar app that might help you on that tinnitus journey. And for that, I want to talk about a scenario. I'm going to explain you how guidance and counseling might help you, but I know that sounds always a bit difficult to understand how talking therapy can help change a symptom like tinnitus. So I'm going to talk about a scenario. Just follow me and imagine what is happening. So After a long day at work, you're gonna take the train back to home. So you go to the station, it's very busy there. You finally see your train coming. Okay, you move in, there's a lot of people on the train, and you see already in front of you that there is an old lady there with a walking stick. She is clearly a bit lost, so you already noticed her, but okay, it's super busy, so you see the lady, you turn around, and then at a certain moment you feel something in at your back. You feel like something is punching you. You feel something in your back happening. I want to know what you think of what is happening, what goes through your mind. So let me start here a poll. I want to know, type in the poll what goes through your mind. So you're in a very busy metro. You saw already that old lady that clearly is a bit lost. She has problems walking. She has a walking stick. You turn around and suddenly you feel something in your back. What might be happening? What is going through your mind at that moment? So take a moment. There might be so much things going on in your mind. I'm gonna already move further, but definitely, even if you don't have the option to type it in, stay in the scenario. And I'm quickly gonna see if I can see your answers here. Yes, great. I can see here some people's input already. Someone is like, who's pushing me? Someone is, oh no, that woman needs help. Another person that says, oh no, that woman with her cane, she gets your attention. She might need assistance. Oy, someone bumped into me, perhaps that old lady. Okay, all possible scenarios. Someone thinks the old lady fell into me. Now I'm going to change the scenario a bit, and I want to know what is going through your mind now. In scenario 2, it's again the end of your workday, very busy at the station. You walk into that busy train, and instead of that old lady that was there, now something else comes in your attention. There is a group of 10 youngsters, 10 boys that are screaming. They are pushing each other. They're very loud. One of them seems to be bullying the other. Anyway, you do the same as you were doing in scenario 1. You turn around and you find your place in the train. But again, the same thing happens. You feel something in your back. I want to know what's now going through your mind. Is it the same stuff that is going through your mind, or do you have different thoughts in this scenario? Take a moment to think about it. I'm giving you some time because I know it's not just clicking on something, it's typing in. So let me give you some time to do that. Meanwhile, I want to thank you all for being so responsive and thinking out loud or out loud with me here. I know people are still typing in, but I want to have already some input here. So it's not a problem if your answer is not finished yet, but I want to see if the thoughts are different here. Someone says, let's get out of here. probably annoyed. You're feeling annoyed because the youths are misbehaving. Are these youngsters getting more rowdy? Might there be problems? Someone types, let's get out of here, and so on. Okay, anyways, let's move further. So you had two different scenarios and you had the same stimuli. You felt the same thing. You felt something in your back. But clearly from the answers that I've seen, they were going different things through your mind, but also people who are already saying in the chat also, I feel different. So depending on how you are thinking at that moment, that also influences actually how we are feeling. If we think, oh no, that old lady clearly needs help, that poor lady, you feel worried. While in the other scenario, you might think like, it's those youngsters, they are not looking out for me, they are punching other people, they're rude, I don't know what. You feel annoyed, you feel angry. So while the stimulus was exactly the same, because of different thoughts, you felt differently. And that is the whole point behind cognitive behavioral therapy. And let me explain it better by a good quote by Gandhi, who says, keep your thoughts positive because your thoughts become your words. Keep your words positive because your words become your behavior. Keep your behavior positive because your behavior becomes your habits. Keep your habits positive because your habits becomes your values. And keep your values positive because your values become your destiny. I find it a beautiful quote that fits cognitive behavioral therapy so well, because that's what it's all about. And let me be clear, it doesn't have to be all positive, but we know that by changing our thoughts, we can change how we feel. And that is an important key element that can help you on your tinnitus journey. So the way we think has an influence on how we act, how we feel, and it's actually a vicious cycle, because if we can change how we think, it might also change how we feel, and that is at the base of cognitive behavioral therapy. So guidance and counseling can help you. It can be helpful to change how we think, to make you feel better, and to change the impact that tinnitus has on your daily life. So it might be very helpful if you have a professional or someone along the way to help you find your way on your tinnitus journey and to provide emotional support. But it can also be good to be provided with some evidence-based information. Like I was talking about in the beginning, if you're in stage 1 of awareness and you're just typing on Dr. Google, you don't know what to believe. There's so much different things out there. Well, we want to try to help you to find that evidence-based information that is true, the information that you can believe and that you can build further on. And of course, also someone to take those steps in cognitive behavioral therapy with you. And in the MindEar app, let me show you the app it has a chatbot that helps you reframing those thoughts. So at a certain moment, the app will ask you how you're feeling and ask you what happened. What triggered your tinnitus to be, for example, louder? Now, what happened? Okay. And then it will also ask, what were you thinking? So here in the example, the person is telling, okay, I had a terrible night. I'm feeling exhausted. Okay, that is what triggered your tinnitus at this moment, triggered you to be here in this chatbot. What are you thinking? Well, this person is scared that the tinnitus is getting worse. And the chatbot is gonna start asking you questions to help you reframe your thoughts, because it's very difficult to just say, think differently. Yeah, how? So it's gonna ask you to find errors in your thoughts. We all, as humans, make errors. And for example, when we're thinking, oh, maybe the tinnitus gets worse, we're actually already thinking in the future. We're thinking about a scenario that might not even happen. We're thinking in a what if scenario. We're catastrophizing already. We're thinking the worst thing that can happen, and maybe it will not happen. And that is what the chatbot will guide you through, to reframe your thoughts to feel different. And if the chatbot is not helpful enough, and if you have the feeling you need a tinnitus coach on that to guide you, we have different tinnitus coaches available to help you, and you can always schedule a consultation with one of us to help you with reframing those thoughts, for example. And if you still don't believe that this might be helpful, well, we did some research so we can back up what we're actually doing. So we did a research study where there was a lot of attention for this study in the last weeks in the press, because we did a comparison. There were two groups of patients. One group of tinnitus patients had just 8 weeks of the MindEar app. The other group had a MindEar app and an online psychologist. And we wanted to know, is there a difference? Who needs that extra psychology counseling and who not? To again help you identify your tinnitus journey. Do you only need a MindEar app, or do you need some counseling on the way? And let me just quickly show you the results. There's much more with it, but just so you know, after 8 weeks with the MindEar app, already 42% of the patients had a clinically improvement, so their symptoms were already much better compared to the start. And when they were seen by a psychologist, that was even already 64% at 8 weeks. 16 weeks after the start, the two groups reacted the same. 64% of the people had such a big improvement that it had a clinically effect and their symptoms were better. And that is nice to see. So we see that the MindEar app is effective in decreasing tinnitus distress, but we also saw that it was effective in decreasing levels of anxiety and even levels of depression. And that additional counseling might be beneficial for some patients, but it was not needed for everyone. Some people were great with the chatbot and other functions of the MindEar app on its own. So that is the CBT part I wanted to talk about, and I hope I made clear why CBT can work for your tinnitus. But it's not the only option. There's also something like sound therapy. What is the goal of sound therapy? Well, it's the goal to provide tinnitus relief by using external sounds. And those external sounds can then mask your tinnitus or distract you from your tinnitus. So we're going to introduce pleasant, soothing sounds for your brain to focus away from the tinnitus. And what we do there is actually decreasing the contrast between the tinnitus and the sound. And we often compare it with a candle in a dark room. You perceive it as very bright and hard to ignore. But if you turn the lights on, the perceived brightness of that candle is greatly reduced, and you might not even notice the candle anymore. And that's a process that we call habituation. So sound therapy might be helpful to manage your tinnitus because it shifts away the focus from your tinnitus. It might improve your focus and concentration because you're not that bothered or your attention is not that distracted by your tinnitus. It can reduce stress and anxiety. It can promote also relaxation if these sounds are soothing and relaxing. Oh, sorry, something went wrong here. Just a second. Let me quickly go back to where I was. I'm very sorry for that. The sound therapy might improve your sleep quality because often you're sleeping in a silent room and the tinnitus becomes even more noticeable. So then it can help to use sound therapy. And of course, it's easy. you can always have it with you, and definitely with the MindEar app. So in the MindEar app, you have a collection of different soundscape that you can use for this sound therapy. You can adjust sound the way you want it, because some of you might find the rain a very relaxing sound, or the rain sound might mask your tinnitus very well, while other people need a fully different sound. And so you can really start experimenting with that. And I want to encourage you to do that, because you might have tested it out already for one night with a certain sound, but sometimes it's really worth looking for what is the sound that works for you to be relaxing, to be able to mask your tinnitus, and so on. And if you identified at the beginning of this presentation that there is a big factor like stress influencing your tinnitus, well, then it might be helpful to engage in relaxation and mindfulness exercises. And also those are available in the app, and you can even combine them with the soundscapes that you like. So I think it's clear by now that there is a great variance in the journey that leads to tinnitus relief. And in the MindEar app, there are so many different tools that you can use. I didn't talk even about all of them. There is so much out there that can help you on your journey to tinnitus relief. And I want to end with one last question to all of you, because some of you told me already that you're further, you're not in stage 1 anymore. You did already some stuff to help your tinnitus getting better, and I want to know what that is. So what worked for you until now? What tinnitus management practices provided the most benefit to you? Was that sound therapy? Was that engage in relaxation exercises? Talking to a professional, or maybe physical exercises, being active again, releasing the tension in your body. So let me give you the time to just quickly answer this. And I see a lot of you are engaging with sound therapy, which I think is very good. And it is indeed definitely in the beginning of your tinnitus journey, it helps you to step out of that vicious cycle, because as long as the tinnitus is so much on the front and is so intrusive, it's very difficult to start dealing with those negative thoughts that you might have. So sound therapy can be a very good step to also help you bringing that tinnitus back to your to the background. So sound therapy, but everybody engaged in a different way, talking to a professional, but also relaxation, meditation, identifying what leads to your tinnitus, what triggers your tinnitus, and then tackling that. So great to hear, great to know that already a lot of you have found things that work for you, and hopefully you can find your way in the MindEar app on your tinnitus journey. And with that, I want to thank you all for your attention. You can scan this QR code to book a consult with one of us, because although there is no current cure for tinnitus, there are tinnitus management strategies out there that might help you find tinnitus relief. And we are here to help you on that journey. So thank you for your attention. And in a minute, we will go into the Q&A to answer all questions you might have, because we want that emotional system to calm down. And one of the tools to do that is to answer your questions about the things that you're wondering or afraid of, or so on.
So first question, are you familiar with any medicinal treatments for tinnitus that actually work to alleviate the condition? Very good question.
A very good question indeed, and something that researchers definitely investigate a lot. There is no medication that has proven to work for tinnitus yet. Definitely not directly to the tinnitus. So your GP or some another professional might have prescribed some medications to you, but often they are more directed to, for example, helping you sleep or dealing with your stress level or your anxiety levels. And by that, there is definitely a chance that they influence also your tinnitus and the impact that tinnitus has. But there is no medical treatment that is proven to work for your tinnitus directly, unless just to talk maybe about cochlear implantation in deaf patients. That is something completely different. That is maybe the only medical treatment really out there that sometimes has then positive effects on tinnitus, but that is in such a specific population. But sadly, there is no medical solution for your tinnitus directly for your tinnitus.
Yeah, thank you. Another question, does repeated exposure to high noise situations, such as large-scale sporting events, as an example, aggravate tinnitus?
It's not a question where I can say clearly yes or no. It's not that when you have tinnitus that you're more sensitive to have hearing damage further along the line. Although you might feel that when you go into noisy environments, that when you come home, your tinnitus sounds more loud. That doesn't mean that you did anything wrong or that it actually aggravated your tinnitus, but tinnitus fluctuates and it goes along with what you're doing. Although you talk here about large scale sporting events, they're often quite loud. That are definitely situations where you can protect your hearing, because there is one thing that can aggravate your tinnitus, and that is further hearing damage. We definitely want to avoid further hearing damage along the line. So in situations where there is such a high level of noise, you can definitely protect your hearing to also protect your tinnitus.
Yeah, and I'll just add, I think that emphasizes the importance of practicing just good overall hearing health practices, which includes protecting your hearing when you know you're going to be exposed to harmful levels of sound. So that's a really good example. And for those of you who may not own ear protection, fortunately nowadays there's a lot of affordable and very easily accessible ear protection that you can buy online, even on like Amazon. Many that come in little carrying cases you can put on your keychain so you can have them at all times. Because sometimes it is hard to, because sometimes there are really loud noises like an ambulance that you can't predict is going to happen before it happens. So those are really good pieces to have. That way you can protect yourself when you're exposed to those harmful levels. Great. A couple more questions here. You talked a little bit about sort of using sound therapy from a masking point of view. Can masking sounds benefit you, or do you become too reliant on them over the long term?
I understand definitely that question, and I think I understand that you might be anxious of like, okay, I start using this, but I don't want to use this forever. I don't want to be depending on it. And you're definitely right, but like I said, it's often something to help you to get out of that vicious cycle. And once you're going further on your tinnitus journey, you might not need it that much anymore. And there is a difference between having your tools and having something that you feel that you need, or otherwise you cannot deal with your tinnitus. If you feel like, if I don't have my soundscapes with me, I cannot deal with my tinnitus, then maybe it's also good to go into exercises like CBT to help you identify, okay, when do I need them? And hey, at some moments, maybe I'm okay without them. So definitely on the long term, it can be still that you use it at some points in time, but it's not something that we see that you keep using all the time, and it's just a tool that's out there to help you find that relief.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember that sound therapy isn't only one kind of sound. You can really use any kind of sound that you find pleasing and soothing. That could be music, that could be audio books, that could be nature sounds. So you don't only have to rely on one sound, which is, and with the technology today, you can stream an endless variety of sounds. So utilize today's technology and change it up. Don't, if you listen to the same sound over and over again, it would probably get boring. I think that's true of most human beings. If you only could listen to one song the rest of your life, you'd probably get pretty tired of that song pretty quickly. So, use the flexibility of technology today and find sounds that work for you. And that way you don't have to rely on just one type of sound, and you can keep it interesting. Great. We have a couple more questions that are centered around noise and tinnitus, but this one I think is kind of interesting because it asks, what do you do when you get these spikes or fluctuations in tinnitus, where this gentleman says he manages it well most of the time, but he does get the occasional spike and fluctuation? How do you manage tinnitus through those peaks and troughs?
It's a very good question. And I think the answer is already in there. The fact that it fluctuates, that you know that it probably will go down again because already. You get to know your tinnitus, you get to know your triggers. You might be able to even identify what led to that peak. And I think what is most helpful is then your reaction to that peak. If you feel that with every peak you're back to square one and you don't know what to do and you feel all anxious again, then it might be helpful to indeed engage with something like coaching or guidance to change those thoughts that go into your mind at the moment of those peaks, because it's often not the peak on its own that is causing your discomfort, but also your thoughts and your feelings of anxiety that triggers that peak, because I fully understand you don't want it to stay on that level. So I think the answer is starting to understand your tinnitus better to also help you deal better with the emotions that come with those peaks.
Right. Here's a question about neurofeedback. Has neurofeedback been shown to rewire tinnitus in the brain?
Well, there are a lot of brain stimulation techniques out there, and I didn't talk about them in this webinar, but I quickly hinged to it that it's not that easy to change our brain activity. As you saw in that video, there's so many brain areas involved in keeping that tinnitus alive, let's say it like that, that it's very difficult to change that brain activity by using electrodes, by using these neurofeedback techniques. And they definitely have already shown that in some people, they have some effects, but it's definitely not the golden standards. It's very experimental. Until this moment, there is a lot of research still ongoing, but it's not the golden standard, or it's not the therapies that I talked about here in this webinar have greater effectiveness proven than the brain stimulation technique so far.
Great. We have a couple questions about, can earwax cause tinnitus?
Like I said in the beginning, if you have an earwax that is indeed blocking your ear canal, at that moment in time, you're not hearing well. And your brain can indeed immediately react to that by creating a tinnitus. So people often also feel that when they're having a cold, for example, also, you feel that your ears are blocked, and you often can then also hear a tinnitus. So definitely earwax can create tinnitus. And what we sometimes see is when we remove the earwax, the tinnitus goes away, but sometimes it doesn't. Your brain started to create a tinnitus sound. Probably you're already also engaged in that vicious cycle. It got already into your attention. It got already that emotional response. So your brain is keep going on with that tinnitus while that earwax problem is already solved. So also, even if you have tinnitus already, you might feel that when you're having a cold or you have some earwax, that your tinnitus seems louder. And then it's also indeed the thing to deal with that hearing loss or with that earwax at that moment to hear better again. And then hopefully your tinnitus indeed decreases again.
What about the correlation? And this has come up quite a bit lately. I've been from a number of patients that I've talked to as well. The correlation between COVID, long COVID potentially, and tinnitus.
It's definitely, we have seen something in the clinic as well, as tinnitus coming up as one of the symptoms of COVID or long COVID. And it's difficult at this moment to say if it's a direct effect or not. if it's caused by COVID itself or by all the things that COVID could cause. So COVID can cause also, for example, hearing less for a while, or by the fact that you're, for the people who went through COVID, and probably all of us had maybe it already once, yeah, you're hearing less well, you're fully blocked, everything is blocked here. Yeah, tinnitus can be a symptom of that, or long COVID can sometimes results into sleeping problems, and then you get more vulnerable for a problem like tinnitus again. So there is definitely a lot of research going on that. If that helps you already, there is nothing proven yet, but in the clinical experience, we definitely saw that as one of the side effects of this COVID pandemic.
Yeah, and I'll add to that that anytime you're feeling ill, it reduces your immune response and it makes it harder to fight things off, including stress. And that can oftentimes play a role in why some people may experience tinnitus during times of feeling ill, including COVID. So great stuff there. Another question about tinnitus and MRIs. Can MRIs detect hidden tinnitus mechanical issues?
If you ask if an MRI can indeed see that hidden hearing loss that I talked about, what an MRI can do is check for any problem along the auditory pathway that we don't see with the audiometric tests. We see most of it, but sometimes your ENT can be wondering why you have a hearing loss on one side, for example, and not the other. Yes, the MRI can give extra information. So in some patients, it might be necessary. Sadly, that hidden hearing loss that I am talking about, there's a lot of research going on how to measure that, but it's not so easy because it's more a problem of connection issues. It's the problem of that electrical stimulus going on the auditory nerve to your brain, and we see that that is not always transmitted that well, but an MRI can sadly not capture that.
Wonderful.
But like I said, because I see it was an ENT suggestion, in some cases, because of the ENT might be wondering about your hearing loss, they might suggest an MRI, but it's not going to prove your hidden hearing loss.
Mhm. An interesting question. Are bone conducting headphones better than in the ear headphones or over the ear headphones?
I assume talking about exposure to noise again, because we also, when we use headphones or earphones, we are, and which reason we are aware of not putting it too loud. When we use bone conduction headphones, the good thing is that you can still hear your environment while you use, for example, some sound stimulation that helps you deal with the tinnitus. So that can be definitely a good thing. Um, we are a bit aware of that bone conduction headphones we sometimes put a little bit louder because we hear a lot of environmental sound. So what we do is then put the volume on the bone conduction headphones a bit louder. So just be aware of that. But it can be definitely something, be very convenient to use sound stimulation while being still aware of your environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also a matter of preference. And if you prefer bone conduction headphones, then those are perfectly suitable for using for sound therapy. So wonderful. An interesting question about musical hallucinations. Any information you can share on that?
And maybe have to bring that question back to you because I know that you also have some answers ready on that. But
Yeah.
uh,
It's a very interesting topic. In fact, we do have some informational content on our YouTube channel just about that. Um, so musical hallucinations are kind of exactly what they sound like. People hear musical elements. They can be songs, hymns, a number of different types of musical compositions that people hear that don't necessarily come from anywhere. It's not that you're listening to the song right at that point in time. Um, Much like tinnitus, these can kind of get caught in our head and we start to focus on them. We start to pay attention to them. If they have some emotional component to them, that can only strengthen the connection, much like was discussed with tinnitus. So a lot of people think there are some similarities in how you manage it, in terms of trying to disrupt the attention to it by using other types of sound, using some type of relaxation exercises. I noticed there's a question here about breathing. Deep breathing exercises are also wonderful exercises to use for stress relief, to reduce anxiety, and just to help calm the body, and get it back to a healthy baseline. So yes, deep breathing exercises, which can oftentimes be part of mindfulness or meditations, are wonderful exercises to practice for tinnitus management if that's something that works for you. But good proper breathing is, one healthy aspect of overall wellness. So that is definitely something good to practice. Um, but yes, musical hallucinations are a real thing. It's a very small percentage of the population that experiences it. But think of anybody can think of a song that gets caught in their head, but most of us can get it out by focusing on something else. But for some people, it becomes this vicious cycle, very similar to tinnitus, and many people think you should imagine it the same way. So great question, though. Next question. Do hearing aids help to prevent tinnitus from getting worse?
Hearing aids are something you can compare it like sound therapy. It's giving again sound to your brain that you maybe also were missing. So in a way, hearing aids, while you cannot fix your hearing loss, hearing aids are making your brain think that your hearing loss is fixed. It gives you the sounds back that you were missing. And what we often see then that is the tinnitus perception is decreased. Also, with hearing aids, you become again more aware of your environment, of little sounds happening here and there. So you have much more sound stimulation like we do with sound therapy. Compare it indeed, when you have a hearing loss, you're more in the dark. If we compare it with a candle in the dark, and when you put hearing aids on, you switch the light on in a way. So it can be definitely be helpful, although I know it's not an easy route. I know definitely when you have tinnitus and you put on hearing aids for the first time, some people have the feeling it gets worse. Your brain needs time to adapt to it. Also, it's really a process. It's not like putting glasses on and you see better. Hearing aids need some adjustments. Definitely, if you have tinnitus, there might be extra adjustments that the audiologist can do. So I'm definitely pro hearing aids to keep also your hearing system active. If we keep postponing hearing aids, our hearing system gets more lazy. So it's definitely a good thing to do when you need hearing aids, to go for it, and it can help for your tinnitus relief. But I know it needs some perseverance. It's not always so easy to get there, and know that your brain needs some time to adjust to it.
Great. So we've got not so much a question here, about habituation. So this person heard it's best to have the volume slightly lower than the tinnitus when using sound therapy, so that over time this will help you habituate. Is that correct? Is that the way to use it?
How I also recommend is definitely not go over your tinnitus in the way that some people have the feeling that the volume has to be so loud that you cannot hear your tinnitus anymore. Well, I challenge you, it's probably quite difficult even to do that, because your tinnitus is an internal sound, so you can put the sound as loud as you want. It might be even impossible to fully mask it. So that should not be the goal. The goal should not be that you don't hear your tinnitus at all anymore. And I think that's the most important thing. Just has to be a sound at a comfortable level that indeed has that ability to get your attention away from the tinnitus. And that exact volume is also something that you can play with and experiment with what you need. But fully masking is indeed not essential.
And I apologize, I skipped a question here that I think maybe a lot of people actually would like an answer to, is why does tinnitus seem so much louder in the middle of the night, or for many people, bedtime?
I have two answers to that. First of all, indeed, the candle example again. When you go to bed, it's often a silent environment, so your tinnitus is just more noticeable because of that. But there is an expression, I have to say that I say it good in English. At night, it's easy that a bush becomes a bear. Um, and so everything in the evening, at the end of the day, when we had a full day of maybe also stress, which also is already influencing the tinnitus, but everything seems more fearful. And I think we all have it. We're really worried about something in the evening, and then we wake up. It feels sometimes like we're a bit reset, and we have a different view on that. So also keep that in mind that yeah, those thoughts are probably different at the end of a hard working day than at the beginning after hopefully a good night of sleep.
Yeah, and I think your point about, being tired and fatigued, which again makes us a little less easy to fight against our worries and things like that, also comes into play. And I think this shows the importance of practicing good sleep behavior, which could include kind of having a bedtime routine where it does make you feel a bit calmer and more comfortable and safer, so your mind doesn't necessarily race. Going to bed around the same time, temperature, making sure you're comfortable, all things like that are really good practices for consistent bedtime behavior. So I think that's great. One
Maybe
person, I
also
guess,
to that,
yeah,
uh, just
please.
to remind, also in the MindEar app, you can create habits. So if you feel like, hey, there is certain things that I should do as a better routine, I know that this might help. There is a habit section that can help you um, get in action with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little name dropping here. Are you familiar with Professor Dirk de Rida?
Yes, another Dutch, another Belgian name.
There you go.
Yes,
So
he
there's.
worked at the same hospital before me, but he's already a long time not in Belgium anymore.
Hmm. There you go. So there is a connection there.
There
Wonderful.
is a connection.
A couple questions about the new linear device some people have read about. Then any thoughts and comments about that as a sound, excuse me, as a tinnitus treatment?
Maybe just to explain what a linear device is about. It is sound stimulation combined with tongue stimulation. And the tongue stimulation has the same goal as every brain technique that has been researched to change our brain activity. It just goes through the tongue and reaches our brain in that way. There is a lot of research going on that. So far, it has not have proven that it's an evidence-based treatment. So to be evidence-based, there needs to be a control group that gets similar treatments, but not exactly that, and to compare it with the exact treatment to know if it's really the treatment itself that is being good or just the fact that you think you're being treated or many reasons that might you feel better. So that is still not out there. So as long as those results are not there, I cannot really give a clear answer on that. I think it's a good thing that there is research on that and we're experimenting and finding out how we can reach that brain. But so far, it's still an experimental treatment.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, at MindEar, we think it's great that new solutions are coming out and innovative ideas are coming out to help more people with tinnitus. But it also emphasizes the importance of being a critical thinker to make sure that these are evidence-based and scientifically backed, proven techniques. Because as many of you on the call may have experienced, unfortunately, there are a lot of scams and hoaxes out there that try to take advantage of people suffering from tinnitus. So making sure you do your due diligence to see what the literature and the scientific community says about a particular new treatment is very important. So thank you for sharing that with us. Um, Here's an interesting one. I know there's been a lot of talk and a lot of conversation around the link between hearing loss and dementia. We have someone who's asked, is there a link then between tinnitus and dementia?
There is no such a big link yet, but what has been shown is that there are definitely some cognitive challenges when you have tinnitus. So the tinnitus is taking already a bit of your brain space in. And so what we see is that you have less resources to sometimes then deal with a lot of challenging cognitive tasks. So when we do cognitive testing in tinnitus patients, because of that tinnitus distracting you and so on, it's sometimes more difficult. The link with dementia has not been shown yet. But of course, again, tinnitus and hearing loss are often also associated. So it's not such a far link. And I think we have to be aware to indeed, yeah, be indeed wise with our ears and protect them when needed, and use hearing aids when you need them, because we see also when people then with hearing loss use hearing aids, that they actually get better again cognitively. So it's something you can definitely prevent, and then that's important.
Yeah, and again, I think that emphasizes good overall hearing health practices, whether that be tinnitus management, getting your hearing checked. And I also think it's important with all that talk around dementia and hearing loss is that the link has been shown for people that are at high risk for dementia. So it's not just that if you have hearing loss, you have this increased chance. It's also for people that are at high risk for dementia as well. So that's an important caveat that oftentimes gets lost in the sensationalism of these types of studies. So that's a great question, and thank you for sharing that with us, Laura. Somebody asked if we suffer from tinnitus. I can say that I don't have constant tinnitus, but I do have intermittent tinnitus. Um, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. One, because as an audiologist, I know what it is, so I can easily pay attention to it and focus on it. But at the same time, because I know what it is, I can also not focus on it and not pay attention to it. But I am someone who often plays light background sound. For me, it's oftentimes music, variety of genres throughout the day, just because I like to have a little bit of background sound for a variety of reasons, including just kind of drowning out any potential tinnitus I have. But no, I don't have it to a point where it keeps me up or it's debilitating to that point. But I do have it, as do most people. Most people do experience tinnitus here and there intermittently. Many of us get it for 10 seconds and then it tapers off. That's not an uncommon thing. I can say in all my presentations over the years, I've always asked the audience, who here has never experienced tinnitus? And out of the thousands and thousands of people I've talked to, I can tell you less than 5 have raised their hand. Because everyone has experienced it to some degree. Unfortunately, for some people, it becomes more of an irritant and a detriment in their lives, and that's why we're here. We're here to help you. So, um,
Yeah.
Laura, what about yourself?
Similar story. It comes and it goes. In stressful times, I can have it for days, and then I need my own CBT techniques to get to help myself. So it's definitely helpful for myself to know more about tinnitus treatment, to also deal with my own tinnitus that comes and goes.
Yeah, yeah, it's good for. It's nice to share our experiences with you guys as well. So thank you for that. Question about pulsating tinnitus. Any advice if someone experiences pulsating tinnitus?
It's complex to answer in one sentence. Pulsating tinnitus might show that there is something different going on than in a non-pulsating tinnitus, but it might also not be. And let me explain. It can be that if your pulsatile tinnitus is, for example, at the same rhythm of your heartbeat, that it is actually your own blood flow that you're hearing. So for example, on an MRI, they can see that our veins, do I say that correctly?
Mhm.
Or the blood vessels are
Mhm.
actually close to our auditory nerve. So it's very normal that we can hear our heartbeat. Definitely in patients that have, for example, a higher heart rate or blood pressure issues. So it can definitely lead to that. But I know also a lot of people have a pulse-style tinnitus that is not synchronous with their heartbeat. It can be also coming from neck or jaw tension there, but it can also be that brain activity makes for you a pulsatile tinnitus, and for some people a non-pulsatile tinnitus without any physical source. So it's just good to have your checkups. Definitely, if you're worried about your pulsatile tinnitus, go to an ENT, have those checks up so you know that if there is nothing physical at the basis of your pulsatile tinnitus.
Right. We've had a couple questions asking if noise canceling technology can be used to relieve tinnitus.
Yes and no. Noise canceling headphones are, I think, a great device to use for your sound therapy. So you can use noise canceling headphones if, for example, you feel that at work when you need to concentrate, there is a lot of background noise and your tinnitus, it's getting a bit too much. For example, in such a situation, it can be helpful to use noise canceling headphones. Sadly, the noise canceling headphones cannot tune out your tinnitus. So noise canceling headphones are great at tuning out the sounds in the environment, and it can be helpful in that way if they are bothering you, but it cannot tune out the tinnitus that is internal in your brain. So I just want to make that clear difference. But yes, it can just definitely be helpful as a tool for your tinnitus management.
And what about the link between dizziness and tinnitus? Any thoughts on that?
So it's definitely something that comes together. So like hearing loss and tinnitus, also dizziness and tinnitus can be happening together, because actually our hearing system and our balance system is super close together in the ear. So you have your cochlea for your for the processing of the sounds, but next to it you have your semicircular canals that are responsible for your balance. So it's not that weird that you can experience, for example, tinnitus and dizziness. In that case, it's definitely good to also be checked up by an ENT. There are diseases like Meniere's disease that leads to hearing loss and tinnitus and dizziness. So sometimes it can be showing that there is something happening that leads to both of them. But it can be also definitely separate, because we also see in dizziness patients that also stress is, for example, a risk factor or making the dizziness complaints worse, and also stress has an influence on our tinnitus. So it can be also something like that that's going on. So there's definitely a link out there.
Right. A question about the effects of coffee, caffeine, alcohol usage on tinnitus, and if monitoring those or adjusting intakes might have an effect on tinnitus.
Well, there's a lot that can influence our tinnitus and our brain activity. So if we drink a lot of coffee or drink a lot of alcohol, sometimes we become more alert and our tinnitus becomes more noticeable. But it's not something you should avoid, in the sense of I cannot drink my cup of coffee anymore. I cannot have my glass of red wine, because it's are always temporary things that are happening. Yeah, if you drank 5 coffees, it might be that you feel it a bit on your tinnitus, but it also will decrease again. So then it's for you the choice if you want your coffee there, if it's worth it or not. That I leave it up to you. But I think we have to be careful with start making our life fully different because of the tinnitus. That's what I talked about. It's the goal is that you are in control. And if you want your coffee and you want your glass of wine, that should be possible. And that's where we want you, not your tinnitus that decides that you don't have your cup of coffee anymore in the morning.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think, monitoring if it does affect you in some way could be helpful. It'll kind of help you allow you to moderate your intake. But as Professor Jacquemin said, you shouldn't eliminate things. You don't want to take the joys out of your life. So that's a really great one. I can tell you, I would still eat ice cream, even if it gave me tinnitus. I'm not giving that up. We've got one more question, and then we'll finish up with one final question that I think will sum everything up nicely. Um, is there any connection between tinnitus being linked with Wi-Fi and or mobile phone emittances, whether it be in the office or at home?
To my knowledge at this moment, there is nothing proven there. Of course, there is still a lot of research going on there, and definitely with symptoms like hypersensitivity or people that feel that they're high sensitive to a lot of stimuli in their environment. I'm not gonna say that it's impossible that you feel that it triggers the way you feel, but there is no link proven that, for example, Wi-Fi connection does anything bad for your tinnitus. So again, I think it's important uh, to deal with those anxieties that you might have, and feel also calm there that no, that it cannot do directly harm, but know yourself, and indeed maybe you feel just very sensitive in certain environments, and that's okay. And then also there you need some guidance.
Wonderful. And then we'll finish up with your thoughts on, will there ever be a cure for tinnitus?
That's your last question that you had. Um, it's difficult. I think, let me be philosophical and challenge you depending what you need, what you define as what is a cure for tinnitus.
A great
At
question.
this moment, the therapist that I am today, I see what when I feel that my patients are cured is when they are having no impact anymore on their daily life, and they have the life that they want to have, and they have the quality of life that they want to have. And for me, it's less important than if that means that somewhere there in the brain there is a tinnitus sound generated or not. There's so many sounds going on in our brain. Um, so in that sense, yes, there is already a cure out there now. We can already get you there. If we will ever have the solution to fully remove the tinnitus, we actually should deal with the underlying causes of it, as tinnitus is still a symptom of underlying conditions. So it's definitely, I don't think, no, I'm sure there will never be one cure that fix all of the tinnitus patients, because it's such a complex condition.
Yeah, and I think that highlights that early slide you showed about the complexities of the tinnitus profile and the different areas of the brain that it activates. And that's what makes it so tricky, is it's very hard to find medications that can alter multiple destinations in the brain synchronously at the same time. And that's a really tricky thing to do. That being said, there is research being done to try and find cures for tinnitus that have to do with hair cell regeneration, pharmaceuticals, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, there's nothing to date, but there are many treatment techniques that we talked about today that have been proven to work until that potential cure comes one day. I think the reality of it is, in my experience working in the tinnitus industry for 15 years, is that we're probably still some years away before there may be something realistically. And I think when most people think of a cure, they probably think of a pill of some sort. Whether that's accurate or not, who knows? But that's, I think, the vision most people think of, because we think of the pharmaceutical industry. That being said, there's still a lot of research that's going to take years to do. Then there's patents. Then in these places like the United States, there's insurance that gets involved. So the reality of it is it's probably years and years out. But that's not to create despair. As we talked about today, and Laura went over with us, there are many things within your reach that are very accessible, very affordable, that have been shown to work. And really, I think the main message of today is to take all those tools that we've talked about today and make them your own. Figure out how to bring them together in a way that works for you. And at the end of the day, each of you is probably going to have a different story to tell through your journey. And that's perfectly okay. There's no one way to go through this journey. We give you the tools. We're also here to help you put them together, but you tell your own story. So with that said, any closing remarks for you?
I'm not gonna ruin your beautiful closing remarks. I think that's beautifully summed everything up.
Thank you. Wonderful. We want to thank you all for joining us again. We know your time is valuable. Once again, for those of you still on, the 50% off code, you type in 50 off, all one word, and that will give you 50% off the 1 year of the MindEar premium subscription. We also will have an upcoming webinar. We'll be sending out a communication on that in the coming days. And this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel within the coming days as well. So I want to thank Professor Jacquemin, as well as everybody that joined us today. And we wish you all a wonderful day and evening wherever you guys may be. Thank you again.
Thank you for all the wonderful reactions and questions. It was very